Hello, everyone. As the inaugural director of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto, I welcome you to the second session of the Fall 2025 Literature in Persian Language Pedagogy, featuring Professor Marjan Moosavi of the Maryland University, who will be speaking on learning to ask why, dramaturgy as cultural pedagogy in the study of Persian plays. The series is co-convened by Professor Pune Shabani Jadidi of the University of Chicago and Professor Azita Talahani of the University of Toronto. It is also co-hosted and co-sponsored by the University of Chicago's Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilization and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies, as well as the University of Toronto's Department of Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations. We appreciate their institutional support. I also thank the Roshan Cultural Heritage Institute for generously funding the creation of the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies. At the outset, I also want to express our personal and collective gratitude to Canada's Indigenous people and acknowledge this land where the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies is located. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and more recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Today, this meeting place continues to be home to many Indigenous communities across Turtle Island, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, learn, and teach on their ancestral land. Professor Azita Talahani, my exceptional colleague, will introduce our speaker, and Professor Pune Shabani Jadidi will moderate today's session. Professor Talahani.
Thank you, Professor Tavakkoli. We are also grateful for the support of Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies, Dr. Mir-Djalali, and the director of the institute, Professor Mohammad Tavakkoli Targhi, for their constant support. I would be honored to welcome Professor Marjan Moosavi to the University Toronto again and our lecture series. Professor Marjan Moosavi is a scholar of theater and performance studies and the Roshan Assistant Clinical Professor at the University of Maryland. She has published articles on topics including dissident theater and dramaturgy in Iran, feminist historiography of theater, and the colonial approaches in the mythology of Middle Eastern theater. Her research has been supported by grants from the Fulbright, Mellon at Harvard, and Canada's Shirk Award. Professor Moosavi also collaborates as a research dramaturg and cultural consultant with theater companies across the US and Canada. She is a regional managing editor for the theatertimes.com. My friend and colleague, Professor Pune Shabani Jadidi, will moderate today's session on learning to ask why, dramaturgy at cultural pedagogy in the study of Persian plays. Please join me in welcoming Professor Moosavi to our lecture series. Professor Moosavi.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. Thank you for this generous bio. And let me know if you all see my screen. Well, okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, the Elahé Omidyar Mir-Djalali Institute of Iranian Studies at University of Toronto and my former intellectual home, and the Department of Middle Eastern Studies and the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Chicago for inviting me to this series. And thank you all for joining us. Today I'm going to talk about, as you know, learning to ask why, dramaturgy as cultural pedagogy in the study of Persian plays. But I want to start with a quick question from you all. Do you know who has written White Rabbit, Red Rabbit, one of the most toured plays in the contemporary history of theater, a play that since its premiere in 2011 has been translated into more than 30 different languages and has been performed over 3,000 times by some of the biggest names in theater and film? And feel free to just unmute or use the chat box if you know who the playwright is. I check the chat if I have access. I mean, I don't have access to the chat, but if there's any response, I'd appreciate if you tell me. Maybe a few more seconds.
Sure.
Marjan, you're giving us enough time to check it on Google or ask ChatGPT.
Okay, maybe I should go ahead. So in the interest of time, and I'm sure you all are interested in knowing the Iranian playwright Nassim Soleimanpour. And the next question, has any of Soleimanpour's play been used in our courses? I asked him. Like me, he thinks the answer is no. But I would be actually very happy to hear that we are both wrong. In my previously published article, Wild Rabbits of Wonderland, Scenes from Translating and Teaching Persian Theater, that was published in the Routledge Handbook of Persian Literature Translation, co-edited by Dr. Shabani Jadidi, I have already complained about the striking absence of Iranian plays, especially those written by young and women playwrights in widely circulated anthologies and most university syllabi. The fact is that this absence is not incidental. It reflects a long-standing bias in both Iranian studies field that educators and cultural gatekeepers privilege poetry and the novel as higher forms of cultural expression and often overlook drama and theater. In that article, I discussed the benefits of teaching plays, specifically non-canonical plays, and I explored the value of integrating theatrical and performative methods such as role-playing, embodied exercises into Persian language pedagogy. In today's presentation, I discussed that by engaging with Persian play scripts and recorded performances of plays through a dramaturgical approach. And I believe we can develop a pedagogy that is dynamic, reflective, interdisciplinary, relational, and collaborative. A little bit about myself. At Roshan Institute for Persian Studies at University of Maryland, I used to teach a Persian capstone course where I taught superior level Persian. Recently, I have frequently taught theater in Iran and Afghanistan. And in this course, it's a content course that is taught in English. And with the students, we read Iranian plays in translation. Outside Iranian and also Afghan plays. Outside of academia, I'm a freelance dramaturg and cultural consultant working with theater companies. What I'm presenting today is a result of these experiences and also part of what I envision should be included in our pedagogy. But first and foremost, what is dramaturgy and what is doing dramaturgy in our courses? To define dramaturgy for those outside of theater and performance studies, it may be useful to describe it as a mode of inquiry and practice that asks, how does a play construct its world? What kinds of relationships, values, and conflicts are at play? What is shown, what is hidden, and why? In Mike Blicker's word, it is, quote, developing an eye for how performances are constructed, how choices have been made and can be made, and what this does, unquote. To Zoe Svensson, dramaturgy is, quote, the deliberate arranging of representational action in relation to time and space, which establishes a relationship with its audience, unquote. And that relationship with audience is important, and we'll talk about it. Unlike traditional literary analysis, which may prioritize theme, character, or authorial intent, dramaturgical thinking foregrounds structure, performativity, and situated meaning. Dramaturgical reading of plays involves the initial process of reading them for their social rhythms. This involves attending to the everyday patterns of speech, behavior, silences, emotional tensions, and interaction in the world of the play that reveal how people live, relate to, and navigate power within a given society. These rhythms often reflect deeper cultural values, unspoken norms, and social hierarchies. In addition, dramaturgy is deeply attentive to extra dramatic elements, including voiceover, stagecraft, and presentational techniques. Such an approach is especially valuable for language and culture pedagogy because it draws attention to the expressive, layered, and culturally specific uses of language in ways that conventional readings may overlook. When exploring how a theater constructs its word, we ask how the space-time continuum is evoked and presented by the text and performance. What ideological frameworks are at play? Who is speaking and from what position? In this way, doing dramaturgy encourages students to attend to what is said or presented, but more importantly, to why and how and under what condition it is said or presented. In trying to answer these questions, dramaturgs and the creative team engage in interconnected processes of textual analysis, cultural interpretation, and structural thinking. They approach a text as something that lives in time, in space, and in relation to an audience member or a body of audiences. In the classroom, this means cultivating what Bleecker calls a dramaturgical sensibility, a mode of looking that trains students to ask how cultural products, including plays, films, public rituals, are shaped by creative choices, historical context, and embodied practices. I encourage my students to interpret what they read or see, but also move beyond that to consider how and why particular forms, gestures, and words appear in specific ways at a specific moment. This includes the fundamental dramaturgical question: why this, here, now, in this way? Inspired by this approach, in practical terms, in my classes, as I said, I employ dramaturgy through three modes of dramaturgical engagement: analyzing, questioning, and articulating for both ourselves and for an imaginary audience. Let's explore each of these modes by looking at a play as an example within the context. These dramaturgical modes are not fixed or exclusive, and a play can be approached through multiple modes of inquiry. I have applied some of these exercises and assignments in my classes, and some are presented here as adaptable suggestions for educators to tailor to their own teaching context and learning objectives. The first one is analyzing scripts and creative processes. The students begin by examining play scripts or performances for their content and for what can be done with that content. I remind them to look at the scripts or recording of the performances not just as final products, but as outcomes of a series of decisions about language, space, time, performative and presentational techniques. The first step in this script analysis phase, as noted by Bleecker, is identifying the through line and narrative structure, and then moving to examine the way script and performance engage the audience, how they direct attention, invite emotional or intellectual association, and prompt particular ways of thinking or responding. This capacity to recognize and interpret such a strategy is a sensibility that is attuned to the relational dynamics between form, meaning, and audience experience. For example, in the play In an Iranian Family, در یک خانواده ایرانی, published in 2008 by Mohsen Yalfani, we examine such dynamics by examining how dialogue reveals the characters' traits, relationships, and movements, how monologues expose internal conflicts, and how dovetailing dialogues and speech rhythms shape audience perceptions. The play centers on 3 Iranian families, total 12 characters. They're brought together by the shared loss of their children. Young adults whose lives were cut short due to political activism or war, and also they are absent due to forced migration. It is set in a domestic space on the day of a death anniversary of one of the kids, Mojde. And it gradually reveals the emotional and ideological ruptures that persist in the aftermath of loss. Through everyday conversations, ghostly visitations, and revealing the protagonist's internal tensions and affective complexity, the play explores the themes of political sacrifice, generational tension, collective mourning, and the unresolved grief of those left behind. Yafani's play doesn't anchor itself in a specific historical moment. This allows the narrative to resonate across historical and contemporary contexts. For instance, it becomes especially relevant when viewed in light of recent histories, such as the emergence of the Madaran Dadkhwah, justice-seeking mothers, following the killing of protesters in post-2009 cycles of protest. Another essential step in script analysis is preparing a dramaturgical portfolio. I'll come back to this with more details, but one of the initial steps in doing a close reading of the play's temporal one of the initial steps is doing a close reading of the play's temporal and spatial logic. On the surface, the setting appears very realistic and mundane, an ordinary Iranian home in a summer afternoon. And it is detailed through familiar markers of middle-class domestic life. However, beneath this realism lies a surreal, emotionally charged world that is haunted by the ghost of a deceased daughter, Mojde. This juxtaposition of the visible and the concealed, what is shown and what is hidden, and why, is a core feature of the play's dramaturgy. One effective in-class activity to cultivate dramaturgical sensibility and spatial awareness is mapping absence and presence of the ghost. This exercise helps the students analyze how the play constructs its emotional and social world through spatial and relational choices. I can talk about this during Q&A, but to give you a less complex example regarding spatial diagramming, I have found reading the stage directions very helpful. The play opens with a detailed spatial blueprint that grounds the audience in a familiar domestic environment. Here is what we have. A large living room on the first floor of a two-story house, with doors opening to the kitchen, bathroom, a bedroom, and the yard, and a staircase leading to the second floor. Unquote. This layout immediately establishes a logic of openness and flow with multiple points of entry and transition that allows movement between interior and exterior, between private and communal, or between everyday life and otherworldly encounter. And this fluidity becomes especially meaningful in a later moment when Mojde, the ghost of the deceased daughter, appears to her mother. The stage direction reads, Murad is the brother, goes upstairs and disappears. The mother remains alone in silence. The yard door opens and Mojde, wearing a white dress, enters the living room holding a flower. For a few moments, she stands with her back to the intense light spilling from the yard. Then, as if in a dream, she walks in lightly and gently. She reaches the stairs, climbs one or two steps, and only then notices her mother's presence. Unquote. I ask students in pairs or in small groups to draw a simple floor plan or a sketch of the described space. I prompt them to indicate these various places, mark the entry and exit points, trace character movement through the scene. For instance, Murad exists, mother walks between the kitchen and rooms, mother's stillness, Mojde's entrance and movement. I asked them to use arrows, color, or shading to indicate mood shift and symbolic thresholds. For instance, yard as a liminal space, or contrast between light and shadow. Each group presents their diagram briefly and answers these two questions that I provided in advance. How does the spatial arrangement reflect the emotional and symbolic structure of the scene? How does movement or stillness contribute to the meaning? What insights does the diagram reveal that were, less obvious when reading the scene as a text? I end this section, the assignments about and discussion regarding the analytical modes of engagement, with introducing two out-of-class assignments that can be used when examining the play and can be done either in English or in Persian, depending on the level of students. And I call it Dramaturgical Play Analysis Portfolio, or just simply Play Analysis Portfolio. In this project, after reading the play, students compile a portfolio that guides them through multiple modes of analytical and reflective engagement. The portfolio begins with a synopsis in which students outline the play's through line, temporal structure, and central conflict. They then create a character map, annotating key relationships, speech patterns, power dynamics, and tonal shifts. One or two selected scenes can be analyzed in depth, as I explained above about Yalfani's play. Students also include a research annotation that contextualizes the play historically, socially, or politically. They can create a text glossary that identifies culturally specific terms, idiomatic expressions, regional accents, or difficult vocabulary used in the play. And finally, they submit a short reflective piece that considers the playwright's choices and they imagines how different dramaturgical decisions might have altered the play's meaning or reception. This can be, the last part, imagining how different dramaturgical decisions might have altered the play's meaning or reception, can be done in English classes about reading those plays. The reflective piece fosters metacognitive reflection by helping students think critically about how plays are constructed and how they can be reimagined. It also teaches students to monitor and evaluate their own learning processes. This, I believe, can be a hallmark of advanced language acquisition. Let me give you another example of an out-of-class activity that can be done in Persian or English again. To encourage students to work between close textual reading and visual cultural translation, I asked them to design costumes for 2 or 3 characters from the play. This activity invites students to engage critically with Iranian sartorial codes, exploring how clothing function not merely as decoration, but as a site of cultural meaning or social identity and social identity. Students are also instructed to consider how aspects such as modesty, gender, class, generational difference, and emotional state might be communicated through specific costume elements, color, fabric, silhouette, accessories, and these are all the topics that we discussed. Each student submits a visual representation of their design, which may take the form of a hand-drawn sketch or a digital rendering. They also give a 300 to 400 word written rationale and reflection on the prompts that I give to them. And this is the wrap of some of the activities that I talked about in relation to the core mode of engagement analysis. But another mode of engagement is questioning, and very much intertwined with our analysis. As you noticed, I kept asking questions even in the analysis phase. So this second mode is called collaborative dramaturgical questioning. The Persian font is, sorry about the Persian font. I developed this mode as a classroom practice that mirrors the role of a dramaturg in rehearsal space. Again, we engage with some open-ended questions. What's at stake in this character's silence, for instance? Or another question would be, what kind of world is being built in this scene? How does this rhythm of action reflect or challenge cultural expectations? In my capstone course, I adapted this process-oriented thinking to discussion prompts and writing assignments in Persian, where students ask not only what a scene means, but what it does and what it could do differently. The emphasis here is not on correct answer, but on attending to structure, intention, and possibilities. One of the best plays to practice this collaborative questioning is the award-winning play A Moment of Silence, Yek Daqiqa Sukut by Mohammad Yaqoubi. It was written in 1999, staged in 2001 in Tehran, and again, I think, in 2010 in Tehran. Theater experts and critics in Iran recognize this play as the most political play in the Iranian dramatic repertoire, and it has a long production history, especially outside of Iran, in English, including its staging in 2 weeks at Princeton University. This play is set in 1997 and unfolds across 2 intertwined timelines. spanning the 2 decades between 1980 and 2000. The first center on Sohrab, a dissident playwright, and you see here on the left side with the kid, the picture with the kid. Sohrab, a dissident playwright working on a script, and the title of that script is called Goodbye Until I Don't Know When, which tells the story of a young woman named Shiva and her two sisters, Shada and Shirin. The second timeline enters the world of the three sisters, Shada, Shirin, and Shiva. So we have one timeline, one play that dramatizes the story of the playwright, and one subplot that dramatizes the story of the play that the playwright is writing. In the play that the playwright is writing, we have the character of Shiva who falls asleep periodically. These are unexplained sleeps, and each sleep lasts several years. And when she wakes up, she finds herself in a radically altered politically and socially speaking world. The political and social landscape is really different when she wakes up. She sleeps through the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the Iran-Iraq War, the imposition of compulsory hijab, the broader Islamization of Iranian society, as well as dramatic shifts in her own, family and identity among her sisters. As Shiva's disorientation grows with each awakening, Sohrab, in the frame narrative, the playwright, becomes increasingly endangered. He keeps receiving anonymous phone calls that threatens her and him, and interrupt his writing process. Ultimately, this culminates in his political assassination before he can complete the play. So that play, Goodbye Until I Don't Know When, remains incomplete. The play's layered structure, recursive temporality, and blurring of author and character invite dramaturgical questioning into some urgent topics, including authorship, memory, historical agency, the personal cost of political expression, and women's situation. These lines of inquiry often begin with the students in class discussion of historical and cultural context. And then when we frame it critically, it can spark rich debates among advanced Persian learners, or if the course is in English, the discussion will be in English. More importantly, however, it is Yaghoubi's blending of style, allegory, magic realism, and semi-documentary aesthetics that turns his play into an excellent case for doing, that dramaturgical questioning. We do close reading and other assignments, and I encourage students to reflect on how time, space, and rhythm function in performance, and how transitions occur, how objects symbolize, and how bodily movements or stillness creates emotional meaning. We also do not miss the opportunity to reflect on the play's diverse language registers. The dialogues are typed in spoken Persian, and Yaghoubi has his own orthographic style. For example, in writing words like hatta or adverbs ending in tanwin, he has his own style. And in the use of half a space between compound words, he doesn't follow the conventional way. The script has brief stage direction, but offers titles for each scene. In addition, the tone is simultaneously lyrical and earthy. The inclusion of Furu Farrokhzad poetry alongside the trickster type character of Jimmy and his funny games and joking remarks creates a layered tonal landscape to explore. These juxtapositions allow students to explore social rhythm and how high and low registers, poetic interludes, and colloquial banter operate within the same dramaturgical framework, sometimes in tension, sometimes in an ironic harmony. More specifically, as we begin the process of finding the through line and patterns, a common refrain running through our discussion is why. To be able to uncover the intentional choices and interpretive cues that are embedded in a dramatic text, we keep asking, for instance, why is the play set in Tehran? Why did the playwright give the script this title, A Moment of Silence? Why did he give a particular scene this specific title, for instance, 1981? or Urashima, for instance. Why does the play repeat one scene from 2 points of view? Because we have repeated scenes from 2 points of view. Why does the play end with a voiceover announcing the assassination of the playwright and asking the audience to stand up? Why is there, for instance, a newspaper in both plot lines? Why does the light fade and return in a scene? And as in previous case, here I encourage students to pay attention to stage directions, to identify and make a list of props and objects in one scene, or make a list of costume choices and comment on their choices, reflect on their choices. In our in-class discussion, we discuss what why questions they have asked that led them to this particular choice of costume or prop, for instance. I remind them that anything that they do not understand or are confused about is an indicator to ask why. So I tell them to return to the script, search for the answer, and also bring again their questions to our class discussion. As an activity, one activity that helps the students to examine the temporal and spatial complexity of this play is mapping temporal and spatial structures in the play. I design out-of-class visual exercise that asks students to diagram the play's shifting chronology and physical settings and to trace scene-to-scene transition. And I ask them to pay attention to where time is compressed, repeated, or skipped altogether. They also chart character movement between key physical locations, such as the sister's apartment or the playwright's home, and consider how the use of space shapes the audience's experience in them, as if the audience is watching the performance. After completing their diagram, during class time, students compare and discuss their interpretations and reflect on how this, spatial temporal structure supports characters' development, emotional and historical, characteristics. Another in-class activity that fosters collaborative inquiry is the What If workshop. Here, students work in small groups to reimagine a scene from Yaqubi's play beyond its original temporal frame. They build on the play's recursive structure because, as I told you, it spans from 1980 to 2000 and has an open-ended conclusion. I ask students to imagine a scene that takes place after the year 2000. For example, during the 2009 Green Movement, reimagine the scene in the new, temporal frame. Each group chooses a scene or a character from the play and resituates it within a new sociopolitical context, responding to the dramaturgical provocation. This is the question. What if this scene took place in a different location or a historical moment? In doing so, students must consider how shifts in time and place affect character motivations, spatial dynamics, emotional tone, and political resonance. And then groups present a short sketch or table read of their reimagined scene and reflect on their choices and challenges of actually extending the play's temporal framework. The What If workshop also offers a powerful entry point for discussing censorship and the creative strategies playwrights use to navigate or subvert it, especially in English. The What If workshop can be easily adapted to students' language level and other plays and context. And it can introduce a range of provocation and questions that are tailored, to the narrative structure of a particular play. Before moving to the last mode of engagement, let me highlight the pedagogical advantage of working with monologues. I assign a project titled Language in Action Monologue as Cultural Expression. Students select a monologue or extended passage and conduct a line-by-line analysis. And they attend to speech registers, colloquial, poetic, formal, religious, or satirical registers. They pay attention to syntax, rhetorical devices, emotional arc, and cultural references. And following their analysis, students rehearse and perform the monologue, either live or as a recorded submission, or they do a stage reading, so they have the script in hand and read it. And complete a short written reflection in Persian or in English. This is the slide talking about this activity, the monologue as cultural expression. And yeah, we end the assignment often with reflections. Then to support the process, I hold on one-on-one sessions with each student as they are working on the monologue. A compelling case of monologue work can be found in the play Acclimatization, also known as A Bit More Everyday, Ham Hawaii, a semi-documentary play written by Mahin Sadri in 2011 and staged in 2014. The script of Acclimatization consists of 3 parallel yet interconnected episodic monologues, each drawn from a series of interviews and extensive archival research into the lives and memories of 3 contemporary Iranian women. A war widow, Mahnaz Daliri, who was the wife of Abbas Doran, the Iran-Iraq War commander, great pilot, a convicted murderer, Shahla Jahed, if you remember, and a professional mountain climber, Laleh Esfandiari. In engaging with the themes and aesthetics of the play, we approach both the script and available visual materials from the various stage productions of the play, and I also own the recording of the performance, so we watch parts of that too. In addition to our routine questions, here we examine in the class, in the capstone course, we examined monologue to monologue transitions and shifts in time. The flashbacks, the repetitions, the ellipses. We can discuss also in English, mostly in English, the ethical implications of staging real-life characters. We also focus on, so these are the images that we have of the production of Ham Hawaii, directed by Afsaneh Mahian. Something interesting about this play is that the character of, let me go back to the pictures. One of the characters is, as I said, Mahnaz Daliri. She has a thick Shirazi accent and uses the word dige a lot. Dige, as you know, is a versatile discourse marker in Persian that can convey multiple meanings. In Mahnaz's monologue, the repeated use of dige signals emotional exhaustion, internalized sorrow, or her attempt to assert control over a life narrative. Examining how Persian discourse markers such as dige, na, nababa, no daddy, for instance, and hala or alan, now, function in different lines, and they help students develop awareness of nuanced shifts in meaning and tone, as well as deepen their understanding of regional dialects and performative language use, and the subtle ways linguistic markers shape identity and narrative authority in Persian discourse. In this case, I prompted the students to highlight instances of dige in the monologue and consider its position. Is it in the line end or versus midline, for instance, or interpret the role of dige in that particular phrase or sentence. This kind of microanalysis allows students to see how even small linguistic tokens contribute profoundly to character, mood, and also audience experience. Lastly, the monologue activity allows us to pay attention to the growing documentary theater repertoire in Iran, mostly done by Iranian women dramatists. And since the early 2000s, many have used documentary forms to address contemporary social issues. And they draw on oral histories, recorded testimonies, extensive interview, and they spotlight marginalized voices through dramatizing, that. And so this growing number of documentary plays, I think, is worthy of attention. Let me now move on to the third mode of dramaturgical engagement with the Persian plays, which is mediating performance and audience. This means how context and meaning are communicated to the audience. In theater practice, this includes writing program notes or playbills curating lobby displays, or designing contextual materials that frame the performance. In the classroom, this can be transformed into an advanced language task. Students research the sociopolitical background of a play, then write in Persian or bilingual synopsis, prepare mini lectures or pre-show briefs. For instance, they imagine they want to give this workshop to the actors of the performance, or the director of the performance who is not familiar with the Iranian context. And they design some promotional materials. Again, they imagine that this play is going to be staged and design some promotional materials, design the content for the playbill and program. These exercises activate, persuasive writing, and also it helps students develop their interpretive and translational skills. In the case of a moment of silence, they can create a text glossary of names, terms, events, ranging from, for instance, pop singers to political figures and terms, revolution and war slogans, to social issues, including, for instance, child custody law or the legal status of an illegitimate child. Some students take the assignment further by creating lobby materials such as timeline or imagine interviews with the playwright or director. Others experiment with format, transforming their guides into blog posts, Instagram carousel slides, or short audio segments in the style of a podcast. Before moving to my conclusion, I want to discuss one more point. One of the most generative ways to bring together the three dramaturgical modes of engagement is to pose this core question: why this play here now? This question can be framed as a textual prompt, but more interestingly, as a programming provocation. I ask students to imagine why a particular theater company, whether based in Tehran or Toronto or Washington, D.C., might choose to stage display at this particular historical moment. What would be at stake in producing it today? What conversations might it catalyze among audiences? What political or emotional resonances it would bring about, depending on the place of performance, timing, and the context. And as a class activity or final reflection or summative assignment, students can be asked to write a short proposal or present in small groups. The prompt would be: if you were part of a theater company considering this play for the current season or for the next season, how would you justify its urgency? Why should we stage this play? This exercise shifts the focus from simply analyzing content to positioning students as active cultural mediators or curators. My concluding remarks. By now, you might be wondering how feasible this dramaturgical approach is in actual classroom settings, especially given challenges such as mixed language proficiency among students, varying levels of interest in theater and play reading, limited class time or institutional constraints, or curriculum design. Institutional constraints on curriculum designs. These are all valid concerns, and I share them from experience. But here I'm not proposing a prescriptive or one-size-fits-all model. I offer this approach as an alternative framework for engaging with Persian dramatic text, whether in Persian or in English. This framework is not about staging full productions or turning language learners into actors. It is about prioritizing inquiry, performance, and relational thinking through dramaturgical modes of engagement, that is, analyzing, questioning, and mediation. And in doing so, it repositions Persian plays not as static or secondary texts, but as dynamic cultural artifacts that deserve space in our pedagogical repertoire. You may also ask about assessment in a dramaturgy integrated classroom. Assessment can center on a performance-based or process-oriented approach that values both language proficiency and interpretive depth. In addition, summative assessment provides a meaningful way to evaluate students' cumulative engagement with language, culture, and performance. Summative assessments may take the form of a final performance of a scene or monologue, or creating a portfolio, creating material for the audience member. And these assessments allow students to demonstrate, as I said, interpretive depth in their learning, and linguistic competence and cultural literacy, and of course critical thinking. Lastly, dramaturgical pedagogy is not simply about plays. It is about making a space for voices, visions, and vocabularies that challenge, complicate, and enrich our understanding of any given society. And I believe if we truly wish to explore the layered, shifting terrain of contemporary Persian culture and Iranian culture, then these dramatic texts and scripts, and also the recordings, are not peripheral but essential. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Marjan Jan, for this very rich lecture. I learned a lot. So as usual, I just give a brief summary and then ask my question, and then open the floor for questions and discussions. So we heard Marjan talk about dramaturgy as a cultural pedagogy. She highlighted the lack of Persian plays, the translation of the lack of the translation of Persian plays, especially those written by women. She mentioned using theater and its recording, if possible, leads to a dynamic, receptive, collaborative teaching approach. She taught us what dramaturgy is, which I had no idea before listening to her. And she said dramaturgy enables the students to witness different registers and characters by asking questions like, why this, here, now, and in this way? And this is you mentioned it also, it's my own observation that it's amazing. As you were speaking, I couldn't help but thinking, it makes this mental concept building in the students. So when they are reading these plays and these settings that you were explaining, they're actually constantly involved with the language and with the brain. And to me, that was very interesting. Then she gave us several assignment ideas, and she said plays are useful for practicing discourse markers with the students that they wouldn't hear otherwise, like Dige Nababa and all others. And she introduced, as I said, several assignments and projects and assessments. And she encouraged us to ask our students to ask always when they are watching a play or reading a play, why this play here and now, which is very, very interesting. I'm sure we can apply it for other settings than dramaturgy as well. So I really am grateful for everything that you taught us today, Marjan. My question is about the Mohammad Yaqubi's orthographic style that you mentioned, that he uses his own orthographic style using hatta and tanwin, just writing them. There are other linguists and intellectuals who've done it, like Dariush Ashuri, who's a very strong proponent of this. I was wondering what the purpose of Mohammad Yaqubi is in using this. Is he simply colloquializing the text, or does it have a purpose on, not using the Arabic, let's say, orthographic rules? That's my first question.
That's a very good question. And thank you for this insightful synopsis of what I just shared. It's a very good question. And I should say that I think both of them. I have interviewed Yaqubi on several occasions, and I have worked with him when I was in Toronto. He lives in Toronto. And by the way, he always invite him to my class, and that experiential learning experience is valuable, so valuable for students. He intends to challenge the conventional way of writing Persian. He's among the first playwrights, if I'm not wrong, who insisted on writing the lines, the dialogues in spoken Persian and publishing that in that format. So he is colloquializing the Persian language, and he's also challenging the Arabized version of writing, hatta and tanween, all, for instance, the adverbs ma'mulan, fe'lan, all of them end with nun. Of course, I just remind students that this is one way of, this is not the correct way, maybe, because I know it can be pedagogically problematic if I expose them to wrong, spelling. But I just show them that this is another way, and this is a movement in, publishing the plays in Persian, in spoken Persian, and it can, again, depending on the level of students, can spark some conversations about why a playwright wants to challenge these conventions. Did they answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Marjan. We have a question from Human Razavi. Would you like to ask your question yourself, Human? No?
Yes, of course. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
I put it in the chat, but thank you, Dr. Moosavi. I'm very interested in theater, but my background is in education. So from what I understood, apart from the technical aspects, is the pedagogical focus of your research and practice. And I'm just wondering, from the students' perspective, how receptive were they, and what kind of maybe biases or challenges they faced, like going through your teaching? And do you think that this can be kind of used in other disciplines in film studies, or even at different, levels, high school, for drama classes? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's a great question. Challenges. This is something that I always make myself ready, and I'm always surprised actually by them, and I find them actually very empowering in my pedagogy when I think about them. Students have resistance to reading plays so seriously because what is the use of it, right? We can read poem, but we can read novel or some just prose or text of media, It's just, so I try to develop the mindset that, well, they are important, that's my specialty, and let's explore together. So I start, gradually, the speed of, exposing them to this kind of mentalities and mindset and practice is gradual. And I always, check the weather, how interested they are. In one class, they are very interested. In the other class, there are some resistance. But I try to very subtly, introduce some of these questions. The questions about, for instance, why this particular part of the plot is included here and not toward the end could be a very complex question, and students might not be interested in that, and it could be even intimidating for them. So I start with, one of the most interesting things for them, of course, writing the through, finding the through line, finding the theme or symbols. But then later on, when I ask them to, draw and sketch the setting of the play, spot the kitchen, bedroom, and identify the kitchen, bedroom in your sketch. Or when I ask them to think about the kind of costume or outfits that each character has to wear, this becomes very actually interesting. I even ask them in my capstone class to bring those props to the class. So these are the assignments that can create a balance between, those serious ones that can be boring and also the interesting ones. But as I said, class to class, this varies. I try to, in my, also in teaching Iranian plays in English translation, I teach it in my course, Theater in Iran and Afghanistan, and that's a general education course. And the students who are taking the course are not theater students. So I'm very mindful of that. They are coming from different disciplines, computer science, biology. And again, when I ask them to use their imagination, to think that they are part of a theater group and want to interpret the text and want to make it accessible to audience, imagine you want to stage it in Maryland or in DC, they actually very much like it. And many of them love drawing sketches and thinking about outfit and costume and doing research about the context. So this is the part, my answer to your question about resistance and different theater courses or language courses. But I also teach Iranian cinema, and because you mentioned film, and I think that in film, students watch the film, right? In those classes, we can actually work on the script. So that could be vice versa, because the scripts of the scenarios of the film are not often, so accessible, and students never think about reading the scripts. But in language classes, we can focus on the scripts, and translation and all the variety of possibilities that exist for approaching a script of a film. But many of these questions can be asked about a film, because it's about narrative structure, temporal and spatial logic, and also about the experience that is created for the audience. So we can apply it to discussing Iranian cinema too.
Thank you, Marjan. Azita, you're next.
Okay, thank you so much, Marjan. I really enjoy, and as Punejan mentioned, I learned a lot. I have two questions. The first one is that because I'm talking about this script or the play that you choose for your language classes, not cinema and your theater classes. I want to know how could you select this? For example, how do you think that this play is good for this level and so on? Because it's something that I know that you have a big archive of this. And then my second question is that you talk about 3 modes. Have you, again, select a specific mode for a specific class? For example, the 3rd mode was, as you mentioned, was very helpful and appropriate for more advanced students, that they can translate and they can, write persuasive writing and so on. Would you please explain about these 2? Because it's very important for me and very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your excellent question. The selection of plays. Wow. Okay. This is something that I'm always thinking about it. There's no best way of selecting the best play, but there is a combination of factors that I include in my decision making about what play to, select. The fact that it is typed in a spoken Persian is very important for me, because I want to expose the students to spoken Persian. They are exposed to written Persian, I think, a lot. Then the topic, the theme, that is how generative it is for our discussion, especially about the contemporary world, because we discuss a lot the context, and I want them to relate it to their own knowledge of contemporary Iran. So the theme, the content, the language that is used in the play, the type of characters is also very important. What type of characters are, used, and what transformation they experience throughout the play, and the length, by the way, because if it is a very long play, depending again how interested the students are, sometimes I'm in one class, I just choose one of those episodes, because like in Ham Hawaii acclimatization, it has 3 intertwined episodes, monologues. I maybe focus on one because I see that students are not interested in monologue reading. But there is a class that I see students are interested, so we read the whole play, which is about 50 pages. Again, depending on the students' interest and the time that we have, I may, Yaqubi's play, Yaqubi has 2 other plays, Dance of Torn Papers and The Only Possible Way, تنها راه ممکن و رقص کاغذپاره‌ها. They are episodic, and they're not very much related to each other. And each episode is just 6 pages. So it's totally manageable to do that. Mohammad Rahmanian also has written very interesting play, Taranahay Qadimi, Old Songs, and it's episodic, and each episode happens in one place in Tehran. For instance, Terminal Junub, South bus depot terminal and Milad Tower. So students get to know these different locations, their history, and also each episode ends with a song. And then we can also, discuss that song, listen to the song. So yeah, the selection each semester based on how much I have read previously, and the accessibility of playwright, because I really want to invite the playwright in Zooming to my class. These are all the factors. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but fully.
Yeah. Thank you so much. But I have another one about the modes. You're selecting the modes. I'm wondering, how could you do that? For advanced level, I understand the third mode. Do you have a class that use the combination of these modes?
I don't, but it's totally possible. I think it's totally possible. For instance, analysis can be done with less depth, or questioning mode, again, can be done with less depth. The design and sketching activity can be done with, I think, intermediate students. And I can even ask them to briefly talk about it in English. I mean, a few minutes of English, it's okay, because they want to talk about their logic of, why they chose this outcome. But I think in advanced level, of course, yeah, because I have had the experience of teaching. I used to teach language when I was in Toronto, but I didn't use this approach. But when I was at University of Toronto, and I'm very much grateful to Dr. Akbari that gave me this freedom in teaching the capstone course. And I realized that I can apply some of these. But again, as you said very well, it's a combination of modes with different degrees, in varying degrees.
Thank you so much,
You're
Marjan.
welcome. Thank you for your great question.
Nahaljan, you're next.
Thank you so much, Marjan. This was great. I learned a lot too, and our students are lucky to have you. We're lucky to, be able to have students exposed to the wonderful ideas and creativity that you bring to the classes, especially the higher level classes. So one thing is, you just touched on it, the unique combination of who you are as a person who's familiar with language pedagogy, with proficiency goals, and also has the theater and dramaturgy background. That combination is quite rare. And I know from the literature of second language teaching and some of the articles published on this that actually language teachers are sometimes intimidated by going into the realm of different areas. It doesn't have to be just theater. I think it was brought up that it can be cinema, it can be literature, but specifically this, the level of in-depth engagement that you have, the modes that you explained, it's very unique, but how widely can it be actually used in language classes? I think you briefly touched on it, but I think it needs a lot of thinking in terms of, is this a model that we can expand and think of a applicable way of taking this into the language class? I think that would be a great contribution, actually. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that. And before I stop talking, I also want to mention that back to what Azita was saying about the how you use them in the different levels. I think, again, it needs some careful planning, but some of the things that you brought up, like the why question and the what if question, to me, for example, the what if goes to hypothetical and how to use the hypothetical forms in Persian. How much do you deliberately design and align your language goals for a specific session with what happens in that session? Thank you so much.
Excellent question. And believe me, Nahaljun, I'm also intimidated by the depth of language pedagogy, and in my language courses if I want to teach them. It's just a matter of curiosity and having this audacity of, okay, let's take a look at, this approach and that approach. And I would be very happy to actually create a toolkit or a simple guideline for language teachers, but it requires a lot of planning, especially for in-class activities. And I totally get that. As I said, I haven't done all of them in my class, but some of them I was suggesting, that they can be adapted. In terms of the language outcome, if learning outcome and applicability, this again very much depend on the learning outcome that we want to set in our course. One of the learning outcome in my class is always helping students understand and analyze the context, and I think dramaturgy this approach helps the students unpack and learn a lot about the context, and learn the sociopolitical context. And then the other thing that is very important in my class is that, the hypothetical aspect. A lot of the assignments ask students to imagine they are a dramaturg, or imagine they are a curator or literary manager in a theater company, and try to, for instance, find the usefulness or urgency of this play to be staged. So it is hypothetical, but I think that based on this hypothetical approach, we can actually generate multiple ways for students to get engaged with the text. The what if, the what if situation is just using their imagination. So if one learning outcome in the superior level is asking students to do creative writing, then this can be, and I'm a big fan of doing creative assignments, asking students to do the creative assignment. And in my course that I taught in English, I asked them to write a creative response or create a creative project, It could be a podcast, could be performance, a video, or a sketch, a collage, visual representation of their response to one scene of the play, for instance. So the learning outcome on the superior level is working on the context, analyzing the context, and also the encouraging students and empowering students to do creative writing. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. And what I meant by that hypothetical was learning to say, for example, اگه اینطوری بود اون وقت اینطوری میشد is a grammar objective of that level, which this helps achieve.
Yes,
that was it. Thank you so much.
اگه is actually, and as if, انگار که, this is a big thing in our thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tawakkoli.
Marjan John, thank you for your fascinating language pedagogical style. I was wondering, in addition to using dramaturgy and plays to teach students how to read and write, whether you also teach them the accompanying body language and gestures of moving hands, moving head, moving lips and eyebrows and ears when people talk.
Yes, that's a great question. And that's actually the fun part. Yes, we do it. I enact those lines using my own embodied answer. Of course, this is one way of doing. I'm an Iranian, but the embodied reenactment, of those lines with different intonations, different pace, different emotional, and using the body language is something that, I encourage them to do it. This could be done, especially in, for instance, monologue section, or could be in dialogue when we are working on the dialogue. But after we, for instance, create the portfolio, after we are done with thematic analysis and our discussion on characters and their traits, then we can move on. But definitely part of the first phase, toward the end of the first phase, when I ask them to dramatize,
right?
Or read this line as if you are sad, read this line as if the same line, as if you are surprised, and yes, the body,
which can be easily documented if you're watching a movie, of course, that the characters are performing.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, in teaching film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for your excellent question. I think we have a question.
We have two questions in the chat, Nasibe and Lili. Nasibe, would you like to ask it yourself? Okay. So, Marjan, would you like me to read it?
Oh, no, I'm reading it. I'm always engaging with the new sides of Persian culture.
Maybe for the audience so that everybody hears it, because then the recording, they don't have access to the text.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. I'm always engaging with the new sides of Persian culture, since every person receives a tailored and suited to her or him information through modern media. Do you think your students are free and independent in their analysis of a given play script? That's a great question. It actually depends on how much freedom I give to them in interpreting. They bring their own, reading of the script, and they're often have the flexibility and freedom to interpret the script, but I also want to direct them in the ways based on the context that I know, or based on the intent that the playwright has. Sometimes I try to guide them, but these are just like all the other literary works that are open to interpretation. And students can interpret it in the way they realize and they understand it. The second question.
And let's wait. Maybe she wants to read it herself. Lili, would you like to read to say your question yourself? Lili? Okay. So, Marjan, would you like to read it, or you want me to read it?
I will read.
Okay.
Considering the dramaturgical approaches and analysis of Persian plays discussed, how can we account for the role of hermeneutic perspectives and the influence of individuals' cultural differences in interpreting and understanding these texts? Could these differences shape the students' conclusions and interpretations of the play? Absolutely. We call it hermeneutic here in your comment, but all those interpretational skills definitely depend on I didn't have time in my paper that is going to be published in the anthology. I talk about the positionality of the playwright and also the positionality of us as readers of the scripts or as viewers of the performance. So the type of questions, the type of understanding and interpretation that we bring to the performance and the play definitely, depends on our positionality and influences that. I always encourage students to evaluate for instance, either the playwright's intent or the characters' transformations and decisions within the world of the play based on the context that we have. If we are talking about the characters in the play, I ask them to look at the context in the play, right? And then based on the values and priorities, evaluate them. If they want to interpret the playwright's or director's choice and decisions, I also encourage students to pay attention to the priorities, limitations, and values that artists in Iran have in choosing these plays. In choosing, for instance, this sort of costume or this blocking and movement on a stage.
Marjan, can you just briefly tell us how many plays you include in, let's say, in one, if I want to use your method in one class for advanced Persian, right, and I'm writing the syllabus, how many of these plays can I fit in? And whether you read the whole play with them. You mentioned that sometimes are short, like 6 pages, you do the whole play, but sometimes, but I just want to know, to have an idea of how many of them do you include in your syllabus for one course?
I'm thinking about the capstone course that I taught a couple of 2 years ago. We used 3 episodes of one play and 1 episode of the acclimatization, Ham Havai. It's because it's a long play, and 1 monologue was pretty long. but then 3 episodes each in Persian, each 15 pages from Yaqubi's play.
And is it a flipped classroom? Like,
sorry,
yeah.
we meet once a week, and it was a long session. That's why it allowed me to do some long in-class activities.
So you read the whole text in class, or they read it and they come and they discuss?
No, this is an out-of-class activity.
Okay.
Even when we may enact and dramatize parts of it, you know, in the class, but the whole bulk of the reading is done out of the class.
I hope that you will include a tentative syllabus, a sample syllabus in your chapter when you write it.
Oh my God.
In your article.
In a short form.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
So I'll give back the floor to Azita.
Let me also finish with this. My favorite
image
of a theatrical production.
Oh, yeah.
But I stopped sharing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marjan, for the wonderful, fascinating, and very engaging and also inspirational talk. Give us more think about our work in the class and how we can use your method, and use script and the theater dramaturgy in our classes. And thanks to our audiences for their very active engagement, for the questions. And also, I wanted to say thank you to my friend, the Professor Pune Shabari Jadidi, for her wonderful moderating the discussion and the Q&A session. So I just wanted to say that the next talk that we have that I share is with another speakers that we have in October 18. Professor Nima Mina talks about modern short stories and poems, authentic texts as a tool for teaching Persian as a foreign language. We are looking forward to see you all on Saturday, October 18, again at 1 Eastern Time. And by then, we just hope that you have a wonderful weekend and see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.